Morning, everyone. My name's Justin DeVille, and welcome to today's webinar, which we are calling SEO SOS, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's really about talking about what happens when your website traffic tanks or appears to tank. And it is a really common issue when we're looking at organic traffic to our website. And so we want to spend 25 minutes or so just talking about some of the approaches that you might take. It's really great to have so many of you joining us this morning, so thank you for your time. I can see there's a few people still logging in. So as I said, I'm Managing Director at Receptional. If I just take a couple of seconds to introduce the agency to those of you who don't know us already, and then we will get started. So as you can see, we're a team of 45 digital experts. You can see the picture of us there at the top of the screen, which hopefully you can see. Was taken in July this year. We went up to Boston Lakes and we spent the afternoon kind of building rafts and jumping in the water and generally getting very wet. And it was really lovely to have the whole team back together again for that day. And one of the things that we did on that day in the morning, in fact, was a motivational mapping session. So it was a chance really for us to get to understand, why it is that each of us is motivated to get up in the morning and come to work. And what we found was that the most common trait amongst all of us is that we like to make a difference. And really that was the data that supports our view that we enjoy helping challenger brands, which is something that I find fascinating, how we can work with brands and help them to kind of disrupt and change markets, but also speaks to our view that we believe in better people, better lives. And that's not just about kind of developing ourselves on our technical skills and developing ourselves as people within the team, but also how we help our clients to enjoy their work and how we help, in the end, their end customers to enjoy the experience of being online. So that's a little bit about us as an agency, and I can see that kind of we've had a few more people logging in. So let's get stuck into the meat of today's session. So it's Monday morning. I want you to imagine the scenario. And the fact is that you've woken up, it's 8 a.m. You're looking a little bit like I am in this picture here. The weekend was too short, and then your phone rings. And you answer the phone, and it's your CEO. And here's what he says. He says, morning. I've been looking at our website, and there's been a massive drop-off in traffic over the past few days, and I'm seriously concerned. So I'm at the chateau today. I'll be flying home this evening, and I'll be in the marketing meeting tomorrow morning, and I would like some answers and some next steps on what's going on. And sorry, anyway, breakfast just arriving, so I better go and get that. I'll be in tomorrow. See you then. Have some answers ready. Cheers. Now, I feel that none of us has a CEO who's quite that bumptious, but the gist of the conversation, whether it's with the CEO or other people within your team and the wider business, is really quite common. And so it is a conversation that we need to kind of engage with on an occasional basis. And so for the next 20 minutes or so, that's what we're going to be looking at, is how do you answer those questions? And here's why it's important to be ready for those conversations with your peers. And the fact is that many search spaces over the past 12 months or so, let me get on the right slide, that many search spaces have changed and moved on. Google continues to release algorithm updates, probably more so over the last year than kind of many periods in the past. And the things that are becoming increasingly important to Google are page load speed, obviously because of the mobile experience, the user experience on your website, and then a diversity of search results in its own listings. And so it keeps tweaking the algorithm to change and improve that. And if you're serious about your marketing online, then you probably experience fluctuations in the traffic that are coming to your various landing pages on your website. And so Google keeps moving the goalposts. And the fact is that Google also doesn't explain kind of its reasoning particularly well. And I think that's because in part Google's focused on advertising and not SEO, and there aren't actually that many people at Google who understand SEO. And often the advice therefore that they give out is contradictory. So there's always that kind of slight process when you're looking at SEO of test and measure and trying to find out what's working at any particular time. And so for the next 20 minutes, I would ask you to act like Sherlock Holmes, don your deer stalker, come with me, and we will follow the clues to understand, why changes in organic traffic happen. So now I am coming to the right slide. And so in the next 20 minutes, what we're going to look through are 5 clues, 5 tools, and 5 steps to recovery. And we'll be asking that all-important question. When you see that you've got less traffic to your website, which does happen occasionally, we'll ask, does it matter? In what circumstances is that really important? It matters. And when can you be quite sanguine about it? So, don your deer stalker, come with me. Here is your first clue. So, while we talk a lot about Google, in fact, quite often what happens is that when you see fluctuations in traffic, the first place to look is really at your analytics, because although that doesn't sound very exciting, problems with analytics and tracking are actually way more common than genuine SEO problems. And so why are we talking about analytics as our first step? It doesn't sound hugely exciting. Well, the fact is that most chief execs don't understand very much about search engine optimization, SEO. And so it may be the case that your boss, he or she, has entirely misunderstood the nature of the problem that they're talking about, and that actually they should be talking about something entirely different. And so it's worth checking whether there is a problem with your analytics and whether you're actually collecting accurate data. And what we're really talking about here is any information that's collected through Google Analytics or through Google Tag Manager. So that may be Facebook tracking or anything else that's implemented in that way. So if you get a chance to, ask your boss where they're getting their information from, because that will help you to understand kind of what data they're looking at and potentially whether they're misunderstanding it. And then you can start to rule out any faults in the data as a first step. And there are really kind of 3 different things that you might do to try and to decide whether your analytics data is accurate. And you start with real-time Google Analytics tracking. So if you visit your website and you're also on Google Analytics at the same time, you should be able to see yourself appearing in the results. You should see that there are actual people visiting your website in real time because you're one of them. And so that will give you some sense of whether the tracking is working at all. The second thing you can look at is there is a Chrome plugin, which is Google Tag Assistant, and that will tell you what tracking is appearing on any given page that you visit on your website, and it will also tell you if there's errors with that tracking as well. So that can be a handy insight. And then the third thing, of course, is Google Search Console, which many of you will be familiar with, but lots of people don't use as much as they might do. And that's really useful insights from Google about how Google sees your site performing. And of course, that doesn't rely upon you setting up any tracking because the data comes from Google search results rather than your website. And that means that can be a really handy check for understanding how Google sees your site and what traffic Google thinks it's sending you. So hopefully those three approaches will start to tell you whether there's a problem with your tracking. And if there is, then that is the very first thing to fix. Another common issue that we see at the moment is, of course, that online privacy is becoming much more important in all of our lives. And lots of websites are changing their cookie policies and updating and perhaps trying out cookie consent policies they haven't looked at before for the first time. And any of these changes to cookie consent could have an effect upon your tracking. And so it's worth speaking to your site's developers or whoever's responsible for updating your website and finding out whether they have recently changed the cookie policy, because that could be the change that means you're collecting less data. And so your traffic may not have changed, but it's just that you've got less information to look at within your analytics account. Cool. So that's the starting point, really, is make sure that the information that you've got is correct, and then we can start to try and understand the nature of any problems. So let's assume that your tracking's all working perfectly, you've got accurate data, and so then we need to start to look at clue number 2, which is around isolating the issue. So what is it that's causing the problem? Why is this perceived traffic drop happening? And we want to kind of break down our traffic so that we're looking really at organic traffic, because that's what we're talking about today. And you can look at that in Google Analytics, which by default covers all the traffic that comes to your website, but you can set up filters or segments so that you only look at the organic traffic that's coming through to your site, which will have very different patterns in it to the other types of traffic that are arriving. As an alternative, I've already mentioned Google Search Console, which only looks at organic traffic and then can be a really nice reference point, because there's lots of additional data that you can get around individual keywords and click-through rates and all the rest of it for your organic traffic only. So that can be a nice starting point. So we're focusing in on just the organic traffic, and then we've really got 4 questions that we want to ask ourselves to try and understand the nature of the problem. So first of all, we want to look at the different pages on the website, and we'll look at, either in Analytics or in Search Console, the pages that get the most traffic, and then we want to focus in on those pages that have lost the most traffic over the period that we're talking about. And that really gives us an understanding of kind of where those traffic losses are occurring on your website, and we can start to understand why that's happened. The second question is looking at your site's ranking. So where do you appear in Google search results? And changes in rankings are really often the cause for drops off in traffic. And if your rankings have dropped, again, Search Console can tell you that, because it shows you your ranking data for any given page or for any given keyword. And if you find that rankings are down and traffic's down, then that generally suggests there's an SEO problem. Of course, you may find that rankings are unchanged, but traffic is down, and that suggests it's a different type of problem. And we'll look at both of those situations in a bit more detail in a moment. If there's an SEO problem, then of course you'll need to understand whether it's on page or off page, but we'll look at all of that in a second. For now, though, we've got a third question. We've looked at landing pages, we've looked at rankings, and then we need to look at content. So often it's the case that the content on a particular page has changed in some way. Often it's been deleted altogether, or it may be that a whole section of your website has been deleted, and you'll want to find out kind of what was the content that was attracting traffic before, where is it now, has it been deleted, or has it just been moved to a different area of the site, and that's why the traffic has been affected. So content is your third area to look at. And then of course, individual keywords. So any page on your website can rank for a whole variety of different keywords. And it may be that, you know, the content on a particular page has been edited, and therefore Google feels that it's less relevant to some of the keywords that you were ranking for before. And so Google changes your rankings for that keyword, and you're getting less traffic because you're less relevant. And that's an easy fix. You can add in some of that content again if you want to, because you wanted that traffic and it was valuable. Cool. So those are a few questions that we can ask. It's also worth thinking about click-through rates, because this can be another clue. We've got our deer stalker hat on and trying to find reasons why the site is changing. And click-through rates can, you know, I think are really just a measure of, in Google's results, the number of people that are clicking on your listing as opposed to somebody else's. And the good thing about click-through rates is that they're not affected by seasonal data. So, for example, in August, which we've been reporting on recently, it's quite common for fewer people to be searching for lots of our clients because they're away on holiday. And so they're not looking for products and services in quite the same way as usual. But if we look at the click-through rate, for the people who are searching, then we're getting just as much traffic as we were previously. And so we don't worry too much about those seasonal trends. And this is, you know, there's a scenario here which we see quite a lot with clients, where we're improving their rankings. They get to the top of page 2, and then they get onto page 1. Once you're on page 1, you're seeing a lot more impressions because there's more people looking at page 1. Hardly anyone goes to page 2, which may mean that your click-through rate declines, even though you're in a better position in the rankings. And often, you know, then, you know, the CEO phones up and says, "Why are my click-through rates going through the floor?" When actually it's a sign of progress, because you've gone from page 2 to page 1. So actually you can say, well, that's a normal and expected thing, and it's actually a positive sign. So worth looking at click-through rates and your rankings relative to that first page as well. And then I think it's also worth just kind of checking how your listings appear in Google's results. And you can see one example of a listing here. Because I think once your site's in good condition and you're ranking well, SEO becomes as much about aesthetics and the way that you sell your business in Google's listings as it does about anything else. And so there's some questions here to kind of to ask yourself when looking at your own listings. And so, does your content read well? Does it look professional and enticing compared to your peers? Have you recently lost some of the features that are available? So for example, you can see the star rating on this listing here. If you used to have a star rating and that's recently gone, and Google's kind of, changing the way that it presents your listing, then that can affect your click-through rate. And it may be that you want to spend time seeing if you can get that star rating reinstated. And also your competitors may be changing and updating their sites, and their listings may be getting better. And maybe your site listing looks a bit tired by comparison because your competition have been improving, and you just need to update that listing and make it look more enticing again. So, those are some of the reasons which don't have to do with ranking necessarily, but how you appear in Google's listings. So worth checking those things. Cool. So hopefully we've kind of looked at a few different possibilities there. And one of the things that we hinted at is that the changes may not be due to your site at all. It may be due to changes in the market. And so here's how we go about investigating whether the market has changed. We've already talked about seasonal trends. Obviously, they're common in most markets. And the fact is that the amount of traffic that you receive is generally affected by the number of people who are searching in your market by shifting demand. And there are a few ways that we can verify whether that's what's happening to your site. A good starting point is to look at your brand traffic. Has a drop-off in brand traffic affected your overall figures? Often brand searches are incredibly valuable because they convert really well. So it may be that your CEO is seeing a drop-off in sales, and that's why he's looked at the website and is blaming the website for the drop-off in sales. But actually, if you're seeing less brand traffic, it can be because you're doing less marketing elsewhere. So maybe you had a radio or a TV campaign that was generating lots of brand traffic. You stopped doing so much advertising, and that's really the reason, the underlying reason why you're seeing less brand traffic through your website. So your boss is blaming SEO, but actually you probably need to go and talk to your marketing team more broadly and find out why your brand traffic is dropping off. And you can do that and find out about the levels of your brand traffic by checking again in Google Search Console, and you can filter by your branded traffic. And just all you're simply looking for is, has there been a drop off in numbers over the time period that you're looking back? In which case you can report back to your boss that that's the problem that you're talking about. A second possible explanation is that there are just fewer people searching for your services. So if we're looking at the non-brand traffic, are there people looking for the things that you sell? Are there fewer of them at the moment, which may be seasonal? Or it may be that there's fewer of them on a long-term trend, that just people are less interested in your products and services than before. And I think I can give you an example of that from the online estate agency market. Years ago, when an online estate agency was this novel thing, millions of people were searching for online estate agents. Nowadays, of course, the market has moved on, it's changed. And if you're looking for an online estate agent, you look for Zoopla or Rightmove, you look for the brand, which is a very different position to be. And the tool that you would look at there is Google Trends. And I've got an example on the next page, which relates to the way that people have been searching over the past few weeks. And you can see there's been a massive increase in people searching for petrol. So no great surprise about that. No great commercial value in ranking for that term, but it does show you how quickly search trends can change. And if you feel that there may be a long-term trend in your market that people are searching differently for your products and services, using a tool like Google Trends will help you identify kind of which terms are declining and which terms are increasing. And it's worth regularly just refreshing your keyword research and understanding how you can realign your business to the market and the way that people are searching nowadays. Cool. And then I suppose the final point in this section is around paid ads. And one common challenge that we see in SEO is that those pesky PPC advertisers, the people who are paying to appear on Google, affect the amount of traffic that we get coming through to our websites. And the presence of those Google search ads can have a dramatic effect upon your business if you're only running SEO. And so if when you look at your analytics, you see that there's been an increase in the kind of your rankings are fairly stable and the impressions remain unchanged, but you've got a drop off in traffic, it is worth checking whether there are more paid ads in the listings that are really hampering your efforts in SEO. And these may be your own ads, maybe your own PPC team that are creating these ads and kind of effectively stealing your SEO traffic, or it could be the competition. And a tool such as Ahrefs or SEMrush will tell you whether your competitors are advertising more than they did in the past. And in fact, it's them that's stealing your traffic. And so those are our first 3 clues. And what we've really been doing is trying to identify what's the underlying problem that we need to deal with and to sort out. And so this slide here is probably the one that you can kind of take away and use in the future when you're faced with this issue. And so I won't go through it in detail, but it summarizes kind of where we're up to so far. And so for the next 2 steps, the next 2 clues are really around trying to find the remedies to the problem that we've identified. And so quite commonly, when we see SEO problems, it's because something on the website has changed. And so if our traffic is down, you're the SEO expert, your boss is going to expect you to come up with a remedy. And so now that's what we need to suggest. And we need to begin to diagnose the exact problem and how we're going to fix it. So at this stage, we probably don't need to kind of fix the problem. We just need to be able to go back to our boss and say, look, here's the underlying issue and here's what we're going to do about it. So that's all we need to know. So I would speak to your web developers, whoever's responsible for your website, and start to look at, have there been any URL changes which may have affected the business, or just go through that whole list there and present them with those suggestions. And they'll be able to tell you about the dates of any changes that happened. And you're really trying to match the timeline here. So, if there's a website change within 24 hours of your rankings plummeting, it's probably that website change that was the cause, and you need to see if you can kind of roll that back or make amendments. And again, the tools to look at here are Ahrefs and SEMrush, and they will be able to kind of help you audit your website if you're doing that yourself. And then we're on to our 5th clue, and this is really the kind of the issue that most people talk about, but actually probably isn't as common as we think. And that is understanding any changes that Google has made to its algorithm, which will affect your website. And as we mentioned at the start, that's something that's happening very regularly, but often the tweaks are minor, so they shouldn't affect your site in such an enormous way that that it feels like all of your traffic is collapsing. Those changes tend to be relatively minor nowadays. But it is the case that signals that were important over time have become much less important, and Google is often changing the emphasis in its algorithm. So nowadays, you don't tend to see that Google updates all of its guidelines or anything like that. The direction of travel is always that Google wants to see great content. It wants its users to have a great user experience, and that's the direction of travel and has been for many, many years now. But it will, it will re-roll the dice. It will kind of change the level, change the playing field over time. And it may be that it's updated its machine learning. So, there's some aspect of its algorithm that it's just tweaking and resetting slightly. Or maybe it's updating its spam guidelines, and so therefore there'll be a tweak around that, which may have a reasonable impact upon your site for a while. Often there's a period of volatility after one of these rollouts, so you should expect to see some change. But often within a few weeks, everything has settled down pretty much back to where it was before. And so you will need to have a little bit of patience, and that may be the message that you need to deliver back to your broader team. And what I would do is I would just stay up to date with those changes. So there's a couple of references there. So there's the Google developers blog, which is worth subscribing to. Search Engine Land produces stuff on a daily basis, which is probably worth subscribing to. And then Moz has just a list of the dates when major changes have happened in Google's algorithm, and that's always a nice reference point if you're trying to find out when there was a change from Google, then you'll find that listed on the Moz blog, and you can then reference back to those dates and any changes that happened on your website as well. So, so yeah, I would just try and stay up to date with those things, because they're nice reference points to be able to look at. And then I think it's really worth asking the question, does it matter? And I don't mean that in the nihilistic sense of, does anything matter? But really in the sense of, importance. Because I think anyone who works in SEO knows that we are incredibly busy, particularly at the moment. And we know that optimizing your site is incredibly time consuming. Building links is, if anything, even more time consuming. And we know that reporting is time consuming. All of these things take up time from our schedule. And we know as well that in any given month, there's probably about 1,000 things that we'd really like to do to improve our site. There's probably about 100 things that are really important and really matter. And then, if the weather is good and everything goes well, there's probably a handful of things that we'll actually get to do within the next month that will make any difference to our SEO and to the results that we're seeing. And so that means that we really, really need to prioritize. And that's why I ask, do these changes matter? And so whenever I'm thinking about an SEO plan, there are these 3 simple questions that I will always want to ask. For the keywords that we're targeting, is there sufficient search volume to be worthwhile, targeting those keywords? Are we already ranking well? But I think in this case, it's the 3rd question that really matters. Is there commercial intent for the keywords that we're talking about? So is it the case that the traffic that we've lost was packed full of potential customers who are definitely going to buy our products and services? Or is it the case that a lot of that traffic was just irrelevant to our business and we're not hugely interested in it for the long term, in which case we just shrug our shoulders and move on? And it may be the case that when you analyze these changes, what you find out is actually that lost traffic is a good sign, because you've been working hard at your SEO and you've refocused your website onto the traffic that matters. And so you're getting that really highly profitable, highly focused, commercially relevant traffic coming into the business, which is a sign that you are an SEO success and that you're doing your job really well, and you don't care about that lost traffic because it's completely irrelevant to your business. And so in which case, that marketing meeting tomorrow is a great time to trumpet your successes, and hint at that pay rise that is inevitably due. So hopefully some of that has been helpful. That feels like a good note on which to finish. If there's any questions, then please do drop them into the chat. I'm happy to answer them either now or in the future. You can see my details there, so if you ever want to get in touch, please do. The only thing that I would say is that before you go, I may ask you a small favor. After every one of our webinars, we send out a survey. We want your feedback on what you thought was useful today, and of course, anything you'd like to hear about in the future. We put these webinars on for the benefit of all of the people that we know, whether they're clients or prospects or whoever wants to attend. And it's really useful to have that feedback to understand what matters to you. So please, if you could take less than 30 seconds to fill out that survey, it would be enormously appreciated. But otherwise, thank you very much for attending today. I've got, I think, just one question here, which I shall try and bring out, which is a question around tackling high bounce rates. So how do we look at that? And I think that high bounce rate question is really comes back to the questions that we were asking in our slide here. So, is there sufficient volume? Are you ranking well? And is there commercial intent? If you're looking at the traffic that's coming to your site and you're seeing that there's a high bounce rate, it may be for one of those reasons that traffic is bouncing, because you're not talking to the right audience in the right way. Or if you feel you are, it may be some of that traffic is just irrelevant to your business. Some keywords can have multiple meanings, and so therefore you don't want all of that traffic. You accept the high bounce rate because a proportion of that traffic is going to be interested in your products and services and is going to convert. So I think these questions are the ones that I'll be asking around bounce rate and trying to understand the nature of the traffic that's coming into your site. Because sometimes we just accept a high bounce rate because a proportion of that traffic is really relevant. Of course, it may be that your site, your site kind of sucks, right? And then that's why people are leaving. In which case, you can change your content, change your user experience, and make sure that you are engaging with that audience in the right kind of way. So hopefully that's a nice answer to your question. Unless there's anything else, then thank you very much for attending. It's great that you all could come today and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.